This is section 2.7, Arrays. In this video, we will talk about what is an array, we will talk about how to declare an array, and finally, we will talk about how to initialize an array. An array is not a data type, but rather it's a data structure. It holds multiple variables that share the same type and name. For example, if we want to store the names of 10 students, instead of creating student name 1, student name 2 for each of the students, we can create an array of the variable student name that has a size of 10. Variables that belong to the same array are called elements. They are elements of that array. These elements are indexed from 0 to the size minus 1. So for example, if we have an array of 10 variables, they will be indexed from 0 to 9. To declare an array, we need to specify the type of that array, we need to give it a name or an identifier, and we need to specify the size. So for example, if we want to create 20 variables that has the name ID number, we would say int, we specify the type, and then we specify the name or the identifier, ID underscore number, and then we give it a size in between square brackets. So in this case, 20. We can initialize an array in one of 4 ways. First way is to specify the size and to initialize each and every element. And we do that using curly brackets and commas. So if we have an array called A, so A is the name of the array, we have a size 5, so we're specifying that it has a size 5, and it's a type int, we would open a curly bracket, and we would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, close the curly brackets, and let's not forget the semicolon. The second way we can initialize an array is to specify a size but not initialize all the elements. This might be because we don't know the values of all the elements. For example, if we have an array A of size 5 and type int, we can initialize the first 2 elements, 1, 2. Well, what happens to the other 3 elements? Well, the compiler initializes the remaining elements with zeros. So they become 1, 2, 0, 0, 0. The third way we can initialize an array is by giving all the elements the same value. So if we take the same array, A, of size 5 and type int, if we just say 3, if we just give it one value, what happens is that the compiler will assign 3 to all the elements. So elements 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all initialized to 3. The fourth way we can initialize an array is not to specify a size. So again, we have an array called A. It's a type int, but we're not specifying a size. However, what we are doing is we're giving values to the elements within the array. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What happens here is that the compiler will conclude that the array size must be 5. So the compiler will assign a size 5 to this array. Let's take an example. So let's declare an integer variable, and let's give it a name student underscore ID, and then initialize it to 0. Then declare an array of 3 integers and give it a name IDS. Then assign the following numbers in sequence to the array elements: 200, 100, 400. So element 0 will be 200, element 1 will be 100, and element 2 will be 400. Then assign the second element of the array IDS to the variable student underscore ID. And finally, display the value stored in the variable student ID on the screen. When you open the file, this is the code that you will see. On line 5, we start by declaring and initializing the variable student underscore ID, and we initialize it to 0. The second thing we have to do is to declare an array that has a size 3 and a name IDS. This array has a type int. So we do that on line 6. And so we say int IDS, that's the name of the array. Between square brackets, we give it a size, and we declare the size to be 3. And then we use the equal sign to assign the values to the element of that array. And so the first element, 200, has an index 0. The second element, 100, or the second element, which has the index 1, has a value 200. And the third element, which has an index 2, has a value of 400. The next thing we have to do is that we have to assign the second element of the array IDS to the variable student ID. So the second element of the array IDS is this. It has a value of 100 and it has an index of 1. So to do that, we type the variable name student ID, and then we use the equal sign to assign a value to it. Then we type the array name, and then in between square brackets, we indicate the element index. So in this case, it's element 1. The last thing we have to do is that we have to print the value stored in the variable student ID on the screen. So we do that on line 10. We use the printf statement and we say student underscore ID now holds the value, and we use the placeholder %d, which will be replaced by the value stored in the variable student underscore ID. So if all goes well, this should read student underscore ID now holds the value 100. Let's compile and run. So we're going to go to the build button right here to compile. We check our build log. We have 0 errors, 0 warnings. So let's go and run. And here we have it. Student underscore ID now holds the value 100. Let's do another example. This time, let's declare an array that has the name color, which can hold up to 5 characters. Then let's assign the following characters in sequence: B, L, A, C, K. So element 0 would be B, element 1 would be L, element 2 would be A, element 3 would be C, and element 4 would be K. Then let's display these elements on the screen. So now let's open file example-2-7-2.c in CodeBlocks. Once you open the file, this is the code that you will see. On line 5, we declare the array color, and we give it a type char, and that's because it's going to hold characters. And we give it a size. Now we said we needed an array that can hold up to 5 characters. We've assigned the size 6 instead of 5. Why did we do that? Well, this is because of the way C deals with strings, and that's the topic of the next section, 2.8. In short, the C language doesn't have a type to deal with strings. So the way to declare a string is to create an array of characters. Now, the compiler will always add a termination character at the end of each string. So if we need an array that can hold up to 5 characters, we need to give it a size 6 to account for that extra termination character. Now, to store these letters, B, L, A, C, K, in each element of the array, we need to access each element. So to access the first element, which has the index 0, we just type the name of the array, color, and then in between square brackets, we indicate the element index. So the first element, like we said, we start indexing from 0. So the first element is element 0, and it's gonna be assigned the value b. Like we said in section 2.5, when we want to assign a single character to a char variable, we have to encase that single variable in between single quotation marks. Now we do the same for all the other elements. So element 1 will be assigned the letter L, and then element 2 will be assigned the letter A, element 3 will be assigned the letter C, and then element 4 will be assigned the letter K. Finally, we have to print the last element of that array on the screen. We do that on line 12. We use the printf statement, and we say the last element of this array has index 4, and it has the value, if everything goes well, it will be k. Now let's compile and run. We'll go to the build button here. We'll check our build log. We have 0 errors and 0 warnings, so everything is good. Let's run. The last element of this array has index 4 and value k. Perfect. Let's go back to our slides. In the next section, section 2.8, we'll talk about strings.